Good afternoon, everyone. It's James Carpenter with Country Living. Today we're going to talk about ghosts. Some people refer to them as apparitions. But we're going to go into a little bit about ghosts. I'm just going to use the easier term. And basically, when I was younger, I had a fear of dying because I didn't know what was going to happen after I died, so I was kind of at a loss. But I've subsequently did a lot of studying on the subject, and passing away is nothing more than the body itself at some point gives up, but the soul moves on to a better place. And that better place is referred to as heaven by a lot of people. There's a term called the afterlife. That's another way to look at it. But when you pass, your soul goes to heaven, and basically your soul is in the form of energy, and the whole universe, everything's connected through energy. So once you go up there, you basically, it's almost like you can still see what's going down on the planet. You can see past relatives. You can do all kinds of stuff. But anyhow, those souls are actually in the process of waiting to be reincarnated, and that's a whole different story in itself. But to get back to the ghost, I have experienced ghosts myself personally. I'll talk about the very first incident. I was probably 8 years old. I was in my bedroom, and somehow I woke up and I looked out into the hallway, and there was just a figurine of a girl, small girl, maybe 7, 8 years old. And the figure, you could tell it was a girl by the hair and everything, but the figure was like a black silhouette. It didn't have detail or anything like that. So the next morning, I confronted my sister and I said, "What was you doing standing in my bedroom door last night?" And she goes, "No, that wasn't me." So I'm pretty certain that it was a ghost of sort. My second encounter was after my dad passed away. I had one of those kerosene heaters. Have you ever seen the round ones? They got a cage around them and they sit in the middle of the floor. Well, I had one of those out in the garage, heating the garage. And I'm sitting in the house one day, and all of a sudden I heard that cage rattle, like somebody had bumped into it. So I go out in the garage and I look, and there's nothing around it whatsoever. So I'm going to make the assumption that that was my dad. He was still lingering around before he passed completely over. The soul can leave the body and sometimes get trapped here on the planet. You're supposed to walk towards the light, and actually there's supposed to be people from the other side to greet you and help you through the process. So I know that was my dad because it was just a day or 2 days after he passed, and I'm sure he was just back at my place kind of checking things out. Now the third incident was, I got a daily routine, I do the shower and all that, and I'm in the bedroom, and there's a picture. It's a picture frame that had a lip around it, and I had like a baby spoon, a silver baby spoon that I'd picked up at the yard sale. And that can be bad news too, because you can drag a ghost home with you when you purchase something like that at a yard sale. So it was sitting there on that lip, no possible way that it could just fall off of there. I can guarantee you that. So I'm out of the shower, I'm in the bedroom, I'm getting dressed, and all of a sudden that spoon just flies off that picture frame onto the floor. And I thought, okay, I get the point. I screamed, I didn't scream, but I yelled out loud, "Get the F out of here." And I had no more encounters with that one after that point. And then the fourth incident was I was in the office of the business. I had come through the back door. There was no one in sight. And I picked up the remote because the TV had timed out and I was just going to get the TV working again. So I got the remote in my hand and I heard a distinct voice, "Stop what you're doing." I actually made a video on this if you want to go back and take a look at that. And I immediately stuck my head through the opening there at the counter and I looked and there's no one in the waiting room. There's no one in the office. There's no one there whatsoever. Now that particular incident there, the "stop what you're doing," I thought the customer was trying to stop me from messing with the TV. But there was no one in there. And at that point, I thought, okay, I'm 99.9% sure that was my mother, and she had come back to give me that message because I was at the time I was having some problems with my spouse, and I may not have been very pleasant with her. And my mother came back to stand up for her and said, "Stop what you're doing." So that was a clear audio. Heard it plain as day, like it was somebody standing there talking to me. So that's my story of apparitions. And there's little things too, and I talked about that in other videos, where you see things out of the corner of your eye, or you hear a strange noise in the house and you go, "What the heck was that?" And usually you just kind of write that stuff off. But the afterlife is not such a bad thing. We're here on the planet. Actually, before we reincarnate, we make an agreement. We kind of pick and choose what family we want to be in, and we're born again, a soul in a brand new body, and you grow up and you have a mission. Everybody on the planet is born, and they have it's like a learning situation where you're here to learn a lesson. And then most of us, or all of us probably, have had multiple past lives. Could date back clear to the caveman days as far as all that goes. But the past life thing is real. Unfortunately, when we come back, our memory's been erased, so we don't remember that. There are some small children who do remember past lives. And there's a lot of people who have had what's called a near-death experience, and they have went to the other side, and all their stories vary a little bit differently. But I've researched a whole bunch on the people that have died on the operating table and then came back, and what they experienced on the other side. So the whole thing about death, you don't be worried about it. you're going to be just fine. Now, if you're the criminal type and you've done some pretty nasty things, there may be some penalties on that, but in the Bible they talk about hell, and I think that you may spend a little bit of time in hell before you get to come back out and be with the rest of the souls. For me, it was a big relief to know where I'm going to go when I pass away. And another piece of advice now that I'm getting older is start getting everything in order. Okay, so like when my mother passed away and we had to go in and clean the house out, there was stuff everywhere. We had to go through everything. And that's very time consuming. So I learned from that. And what I learned is I'm going to get all my valuable stuff situated in 1 or 2 or 3 different locations so that when I do pass, my siblings don't have to hunt and pick, go through everything, find out what we should keep, what we shouldn't keep. Everything that needs to be kept will be in 1, 2, 3 different locations. So that's going to simplify it for them. Plus, it's going to guarantee that nothing slips through the cracks. I kind of left one thing out. I did have another situation where I had went to a psychic medium, and during the interview, it was just her and I in the office. And she said, "Who do you want to speak to on the other side?" And I said, I want to speak to my mother. And she says, "All right, I'm going to ask her a bunch of questions before we bring her in." She used the term bring her in, and I guess that means before I start talking with her. So she did locate my mother, and she started asking questions, and a lot of them seemed to me a little bit vague, like, yeah, could be, couldn't be. But she did finally ask one question that only my mother and I knew, and I immediately said, "That's her." So we brought my mother in, and when I spoke to her, I asked her little things like, "What do you think about everything I did to the house?" She goes, "Oh, it looks great, but I would have picked different colors." She meant by the paint. And we talked a little bit more about different things, but she brought something up that was pretty cool. I had redone the driveway, and just out of the blue, she says, "I like what you did to the driveway." So I am 99.9% sure that I was actually having a conversation with my mother on the other side. And then we got on the topic of my dad, so they brought my dad in, and he was he answered some questions for me. First of all, I said, "Do you like what I did with the pole barn?" And he came back and said, "Did you find what I had written on the wall inside there on a board?" And I said, "No, I didn't stumble onto that." And I had asked him about the septic system. That old farmhouse, the septic system probably dates back to the 40s. And it was pretty primitive, and it kept backing up in the house. So I dug a trench and put a new leach line in, and that resolved the problem. But I was asking him about that, and he says, "Don't spend too much money on that septic system because you're going to get city sewage soon." And I thought, wow, that's good information. And about a year passed, and there was 88 acres of land about a mile and a half from me. And the city had purchased the 88 acres, and they're going to put in a sewer treatment plant, of all things, which means as close as I am, they're going to run lines right down my road. So that information that my dad gave me is positively true. It's just a matter of time before they start construction on that facility. And eventually I'll have city sewage clear out here in the country, which would be pretty nice. But when I say out in the country, it back in the 60s, yes, this was stone cold country. But the city of Columbus, especially in the northwest corner, which is Dublin, has creeped out here. They're within 3 miles of me at this point. $1 million homes just being built everywhere. So we'll see how all that goes. It's been good for my auto repair shop because I have access to more customers, which is great. So if you do want to speak with somebody on the other side, you can seek out a psychic medium and they can help you with that. And I did have a question in the comments on one of my last videos. And the question was, if we're going from the third dimension to the fifth dimension, what about the fourth? So I basically answered the question by saying that the fourth dimension, people on the planet, some of us are already in the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is just an evolved soul. But when we move on to that other timeline, it's going to be the fifth dimension. Even though some of us right now are in the fourth dimension, just look at the fourth dimension as kind of a stepping stone before you go into the fifth dimension. So with that being said, I'm going to close the video. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to watch my videos. I'd appreciate it if you could leave me some comments. And you have a great day. Thank you.